Well, we're going to talk to Jo Baxter, who is the Executive Director of Drug Free Australia and also Vice President of WFAD, the World Federation Against Drugs. We're going to talk a little bit about the drug situation in Australia. So could you just give us an update on the drug situation in Australia, please?
Oh, yes, I'd be happy to. Mainly because we are very concerned about the level of drug use in Australia and generally in Oceania. We actually have the highest amphetamine and ecstasy rate in the OECD and in Oceania directly. And these stats come from the United Nations as well as other stats that we can compare them with. So it is very concerning because they're drugs that young people tend to use. And therefore, we feel that they're riding a very risky path in so doing. What we are concerned about as well is that we've recently had a very strong pro-drug legalisation lobby working hard in Australia at an increasing level. It was actually spearheaded by a fellow called Ethan Nadelman, who's actually an American and came across to Australia and espoused what he thought was quite knowledgeable information about a country that he was only visiting. The media gave him a lot of press, and he actually came straight out with saying that drugs should be legalised, marijuana should be made legal for medical purposes, and that we need more safe injecting rooms in our country. That was then followed up by a fellow that actually lives in Australia. He's an Australian called Dr. Wodak, and he has just followed along from the increasing conversation about legal drug taking and legal drug use of illicit drugs. And so we're really fighting very hard at the moment to win the debate and to keep the debate logical and safe for people and families in Australia.
So what do the politicians say about all this? Are all the politicians in favor of legalizing drugs, introducing so-called medical marijuana, injecting rooms, and maybe heroin distribution? Are all the politicians agreeing on this, or?
No, definitely not. In fact, the majority of people in Australia, including politicians, don't agree that legalising drugs is a good idea. The drugs that are controlled, that is, the narcotics, the illicit drugs. Some are starting to sway towards the fact that medical marijuana could have some merits. And they're being, I suppose, persuaded by a rather compassionate argument that people could, in their last stages of life, get some comfort from medical marijuana. But we're making sure that the facts get out there that there are enough drugs that do the same job as marijuana would do, that are already legal and controlled and safe to use. We are worried that if medical marijuana was allowed to be used, as it is in some places in the world, it sends a message that marijuana is a safe drug. And we know, actually just today, I've read a recent report that was done in Australia that's actually now proved a direct link between marijuana and psychotic disorders, schizophrenia and psychotic episodes. It's one of the strongest pieces of evidence that's come out with a very large sample group of people that have used marijuana for a long time. And it's particularly damaging for young people because of its strength and because of their developing brain. So we are very, very concerned that this very unhealthy, unwise argument about medical marijuana is being promoted when, in fact, there are enough safe drugs to use that will help people who might be needing more comfort in their last stages of life.
So you think this latest research would possibly influence the future debate in your country?
I'm hoping it will. The doctor that actually did the research has stated in one of his media releases that he's absolutely disgusted that there is even any thought that marijuana could be used for medicine. What he has seen, the destruction of families, the violent episodes that occur when people use marijuana for a long time and regularly. He's just seen it all. And so the research is very strongly against medical marijuana.
Now, you are living in Adelaide. If we look at other parts of Australia, would the debate be roughly the same as in your part of the country?
Yes, luckily, although I live in Adelaide, because of technology, Torgny, I'm able to work with others across the globe, actually, but certainly in the other states of Australia. And so we have representatives in every state and territory. We have members and we also have board members who are very active in their local areas. And we're finding that the trends are very similar. Although Australia is a large geographical country, the population is not large. We only have 21 million people. So compared to, say, the US or the United Kingdom or other countries in Europe, Australia does not have a large population. Therefore, it's actually quite easy to reach and to get our message out there because of technology, media, email, our webpage, and also any social networking sites that we can work with.
Now, what do you think then will be the way ahead? Where do you think you will end up going from where you are right now, the drug policy in Australia?
In Australia?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Well, we have a wonderful opportunity through the World Federation Against Drugs to be at a forthcoming United Nations meeting where government officials from all over the world will be present. At that meeting, we are going to link with as many of those government representatives as we can to let them know about a very important convention from the United Nations known as the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And in that particular convention, it's very specific about how countries and governments need to protect children from drug use, drug trafficking, drug manufacture, and initial uptake of drugs. And very, very clear about the rights of children to be protected within their families, within their communities. Every country in the world, except 2, we're given to understand, have actually signed and ratified this convention. So what we want to do is bring it to their attention again, because the signing took place with many countries, as much as a decade ago. We just want to remind them now that drug use seems to be increasing and it's quite troublesome across the world, that as government officials, they have a responsibility to take back to their political leaders this reminder that, please, when you formulate your drug policy, think about what it's going to do with the children in the world. In Australia, we have an excellent report, actually 2 excellent parliamentary inquiries. One was called The Road to Recovery, and the other was called The Winnable War on Drugs. Now, these parliamentary inquiries interviewed over 400 individuals and organisations each over a period of 7 years. Quite a costly exercise, and they were brought down in 2007. We're now into 2011, so 4 years has passed, and sadly, our government at the national level has not chosen to take any of the advice from both reports, but each of them have answers to how we can prevent illicit drug use, how we can help families before it gets too bad. And we're constantly looking at Sweden and the wonderful work being done there by your government and all the other partners that they have, including the police, the schools and the medical profession. And we want to work together in a cohesive way in this country and encourage our governments to do the same thing. The answers are already there, Torgny. The statistics are there. The majority of people in Australia don't want drugs legalised. They don't want their families damaged. So I'm going to come back following that meeting in Vienna and begin some workshops with politicians and help them to understand what that convention means and what their responsibilities are. And I'm sure that not many of them could argue against that, because most of them do not want their children to have a bad future.
You have been listening to Executive Director Jo Baxter from Drug Free Australia, and she's also the Vice President of WFAD, the World Federation Against Drugs. Thank you very much, Jo, for talking to us, and goodbye.
Thank you, Torgny.